live blood analysis and electrosmog. We can learn much by looking at our blood under a microscope. This short video shows a macrophage, which is like a vacuum cleaner, engulfing bacteria among red blood cells. I decided to find out what my blood looked like. I pricked my finger, placed a drop of blood on a slide, and looked at it under the microscope. This is what I saw. The cells are round, some are separate, and a few are sticking together. Overall, fairly healthy looking blood. This testing was done in a clean electromagnetic environment, and I did not eat or drink before or during testing. I then worked on a computer for 70 minutes and looked at my blood again. This time, the cells are sticking together like stacked coins. This is called rouleau formation. Later that day, I used a cordless phone for 10 minutes and looked at my blood again. And this is what I saw. Very unhealthy looking blood. There are virtually no single cells. Most of the cells are now in rouleau formation. A doctor told me this is what she sees with cancer patients. What I learned is that my blood goes into rouleau formation when I use a computer or a mobile phone. This type of clumping interferes with the release of oxygen and the removal of waste products like carbon dioxide.
The capillaries are so narrow that red cells must squeeze through in single file, showing the importance of their elasticity.
What are the consequences of rouleau formation? Poor circulation resulting in lower oxygen transport to cells and reduced waste removal. What are the symptoms someone may experience? Headaches and fatigue, difficulty concentrating, numbness, tingling, and cold extremities, and possibly heart and blood pressure problems, including risk of stroke. What is the significance of this? Live blood analysis may be a good diagnostic for electrohypersensitivity.
Now we can go 4 minutes, some people can go maybe 8 or 10 minutes without oxygen. We can go a few days without water. We can go for months without food. But 15 seconds without ATP.
What is aerobic respiration? And what is fermentation? But seriously though, I have made videos on those two topics, and they're all about cellular respiration. They're the two different forms of cellular respiration. And cellular respiration is where cells break down high energy organic molecules like glucose to release energy. That energy then fuels the ATP cycle. And today's video, I'm going to answer the question, what is the ATP cycle? How does it work? And why do we need it? What is ATP? ATP is this molecule called adenosine triphosphate. That's where it gets its name from, ATP. And it's a really important short-term energy storage compound in cells. It's made up of adenosine and 3 phosphate groups. That's where it gets its name. Adenosine, tri meaning 3, phosphates. Now the third phosphate, I've drawn a squiggly line there to indicate that that is an unstable bond. That bond can be broken, and ATP can be converted into ADP, diphosphate, and an extra phosphate group. When that happens, energy is released. Now remember, cells need energy to survive, and they need energy for things like movement and synthesis and active transport. So ATP enables cells to do those things because when it's converted into ADP, the energy that's released can allow cells to do those jobs. So here you can see in this diagram how that process works. First of all, I want you to concentrate on this bottom part here. This is ATP that we just looked at. 1, 2, 3 phosphates, so that's our ATP molecule. Squiggly bond showing that it's unstable. Now with the addition of some water, a hydrolysis reaction occurs and this phosphate is broken off. That means that ATP is converted into ADP, D standing for di, which means 2, and a spare phosphate group over here. So that conversion takes place, and when that conversion takes place, energy is released and it's used by the cell for the things that we just looked at. Synthesis, movement, active transport, all those sorts of things. Here's the catch. Cells need ATP continuously. They always require ATP to break it down to ADP. But if that process was a one-way process, we're going to run out. And that's why we need the ATP cycle. We need another step where we can actually put ATP back together and add this phosphate back on. And it just so happens that because breaking it down or converting the ATP to ADP released energy and was exothermic, meaning energy exits the reaction, adding the phosphate back on to make ATP again is an endothermic process, which means it requires energy, and that energy that is required to attach the phosphate back on and form ATP comes from cellular respiration, aerobic respiration, or fermentation. Check those videos out if you haven't already. So that forms our ATP cycle. The exothermic process of breaking down ATP to ADP and P, or converting it, and the endothermic process where energy needs to enter the reaction, which is attaching the phosphate back onto ADP and forming ATP. That cycle occurs continuously. And an amazing thing is the amount of ATP that actually gets recycled in this process. In fact, in one day, the equivalent of a human body weight of ATP is recycled in your body. Just think about that. So let's say you're 65 kilograms. In one day, your body uses up 65 kilograms of ATP. So let me ask you the question, why are you still here? Why don't you vanish in that day? You got it. It's because you produce 65 kilograms of ATP in that same amount of time. It's a continuous cycle. It's always breaking it down and regenerating it over and over again. So just one more way to look at it. I've got these 3 cogs here, or gears. Now, let's label these different gears. Now remember, if this one's moving, it will drive this one, and that will drive this one. Let's think of this first cog as cellular respiration, aerobic respiration, or fermentation. Now, that starts moving, and that process is occurring, and the energy released from that process drives the ATP cycle. So the ATP cycle is able to occur. And the ATP cycle is what provides the energy for cellular processes like movement and synthesis and active transport. What I want you to think about is, imagine if we take away the ATP cycle. That process is now not occurring. Cellular respiration can still be occurring as much as you like. But what's going to happen to the cellular processes? Is anything going to be driving those? No. They're going to come to a standstill. So without the ATP cycle, cellular processes can't occur, even though cellular respiration provides energy. It's a chain of events that is really important, and the ATP cycle fits in that really important space.
I call these LEDs Trojan horses because they appear so practical to us. They appear to have so many advantages. They save energy. They are solid state, so are very robust, for example. So we invited them into our homes, but we are not aware that they have hidden properties which are harmful to our system, harmful to our mental health, harmful to our retinal health, and also harmful to our hormonal health.
We are joined by Dr. Alexander Wunsch from Germany, and he is really a world-class expert, one of the best I know of in photobiology. We're going to talk about the dangers, the hidden stealth dangers of LED lighting that you most likely are not aware of. So welcome, and thank you for joining us today, Dr. Wunsch.
Hi, Dr. Mercola.
Can you describe at a biological level what happens when we're exposed to these wavelengths from incandescent bulbs or solar radiation from the near infrared, and how it helps restructure at a molecular basis our mitochondria, and what happens in the retina, and in not only, and the other light source I was neglected to mention was infrared saunas. We can have a discussion on that too.
Mm-hmm. So the first question we have to ask is, what molecules are we addressing, or what are the so-called, in photobiology, you call these molecules chromophores. These are molecules which are capable of absorbing exactly the wavelength you are emitting with the light source. And the first aspect is that we have to consider that there is a so-called optical tissue window, which ranges from 600 nanometers to 1,400 nanometers. So it's almost completely covered by the infrared A part of the spectrum. And this optical tissue window allows the radiation to penetrate deeply into the tissue. And when I say deeply, I'm not talking about a millimeter or two. I'm talking about several centimeters, or let's say at least an inch or even more. And the chromophores in the tissue, which absorb the light energy, are a part of these chromophores is found in the mitochondria, and the other part are the water molecules, which are specifically activated, not in terms of heat radiation, of chaotic molecular movement. The water molecules are specifically addressed, for example, in the realm of membranes, in the exclusion zone, which covers like a sheet, like a cover, the microanatomical structures within the cells. So talking about the mitochondria first, here we have a specific molecule which is called cytochrome C oxidase, and this molecule is involved in the energy production within the mitochondria. Energy for cells means adenosine triphosphate, which is the end product of the phosphorylation of the energy production. And this is the fuel our cells need for almost anything, for motion, for motility, for transporting of iron, for synthesizing products, for metabolism. So the ATP production, if it would stop now at the moment, I could survive for another 12 or 15 seconds. So my body produces about 85 kilograms of ATP in 24 hours. Because the cytochrome C oxidase, which is this absorbing molecule, is the last step before the ATP is finally produced in the mitochondria. And here we have this tipping point where light in a wavelength range between 570 nanometers and 850 nanometers is able to boost the energy production, especially in cells where the energy production is depleted. So here we have one important mechanism where this long wavelength part of the spectrum, where the near infrared light is bolstering the energy situation in our mitochondria. And we know today that many signs of aging, for example, they really are the consequence of hampered mitochondrial functioning. And so we have a very interesting and still soft tool to enhance the energy status in our cells, in the mitochondria in our cells, and not only on the surface, but also in the depth regions and areas of the tissue. And this is one important aspect. And there are hundreds of papers published on these positive effects. You can see it in, for example, wound healing. You can see it in anti-aging procedures, and there are many applications developed in the meantime where we use this optical tissue window, and we shine through this optical tissue window light in a range which cannot be found in standard general lighting appliances like LEDs or fluorescent lamps. So the cytochrome C oxidase is responsible for an increased production of ATP, and this means in turn that a cell which has a better energy supply is definitely able to perform better. So the liver cell with more ATP will be able to detoxify the body much better. The fibroblasts in the skin will be able to synthesize more collagen fibers, and so on and so on. So this is one important brick in the wall.
Maybe only one third, a measly third of our energy that we produce, and ultimately why it does was ATP, comes from the food that we eat. The electrons that are transferred from the food, primarily the fats and the carbohydrates that ultimately transferred to oxygen and generate that ATP. But only 1/3 of the energy comes. The rest, 2/3 or so, comes from this light exposure. And if you're exposed to LED lights, as you just mentioned, but again, it may go over people's heads, the LEDs don't have that frequency from 500 to, I believe, 800 nanometers of wavelength, which is the near infrared primarily, that hit the cytochrome C oxidase and generate the energy of the ATP. So can you expand on that? Because I think virtually no one has this appreciation.
Yeah, I think we have to differentiate between the metabolically used energy, which definitely comes from food intake, but there is a thermodynamic aspect to it as well. And when you think about the body temperature, I don't know how much it is in Fahrenheit, but in Celsius, I can tell you in Celsius it's 37 degrees, and I can tell you in Kelvin this is 310 Kelvin. To keep up this body temperature is not only the result of burning carbohydrates in the mitochondria using the oxygen.
Just for a moment, the 37 degrees centigrade or Celsius that you mentioned is basically body temperature, which is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, 98.6. Okay.
90.6?
98.6.
98.6. Okay, so this I have to learn. So to maintain this body temperature is not only the result of energy production in the mitochondria. The heat in our body comes in part from the mitochondria, but the major part comes from longer wavelengths in the infrared range, and comes from near infrared, for example, because the near infrared radiation in sunlight is very present, in incandescent lamplight as well. This radiation, this energy, this photonic energy is able to even pass through our clothing, because this is one important property of infrared radiation, that it just goes deep and it goes through, like the terahertz radiation at the airport scanners and so on. And the radiation can enter the body and then will be transformed into longer wavelengths in the infrared part. And they are very important for supporting the temperature level, or the thermal energy level of our body, which is for all the mammals a very crucial aspect. So a lot of energy comes in the form of radiation, and this is supporting our thermal balance, more or less. The light emitted from an LED has not the same quality you would expect from a natural light source. A natural light source normally is a black body radiator, which gives off all kinds of wavelengths in a more or less continuous manner. And the LEDs we have nowadays are fluorescent lamps. They consist of a blue LED, a driver LED, and a fluorescent sheet, which covers the blue LED and transforms a part of the blue light into longer wavelengths, yellowish light. And the yellowish light from the fluorescent layer combines together with the residual blue light to a kind of whitish light, which consists of a large portion of aggressive blue light. Blue has the highest energy in the visible part of the spectrum, and causes or induces the production of reactive oxygen species, of oxidative stress. So the blue light causes oxidative stress in the tissue, and this stress has to be counteracted. We need even more regeneration from blue light, but the regenerative part of the spectrum is not found in the blue, in the short wavelength part. It's found in the long wavelength part, in the red and the near infrared. So tissue regeneration and tissue repair results from the wavelengths which are not present in an LED spectrum. So we have increased stress on the short wavelength part, and we have reduced regeneration and repair on the long wavelength part. And this is the main problem, that the scissors come apart in a way our organism is not accommodated to, because we don't have this kind of light quality in nature.
Are there any healthy LEDs?
Well, there's no easy answer to that.
Like most good questions.
Because when you bought an incandescent lamp, you exactly knew everything about the spectral distribution, for example. You knew that after 1,000 hours it would fail, it would break, stop functioning. With the LEDs, everything is different, because there are LEDs outside there where you have high portions of blue in a warm appearing light, because the blue is masked by high amounts of yellow and orange. There are also LEDs available with a lower portion in the blue, which are very close to the spectral distribution of an incandescent lamp with regard to the bluish part of the spectrum. It is impossible to tell without measurement. And this is the problem. With an incandescent lamp, you knew what you would get, and with an LED, the layman is not able to tell if it's a tailored spectrum where you have the blue part only masked by excessive parts of other spectral regions.
If you're exposed to LED light, and there's lots of biological full spectrum sunlight through the windows, which is a whole other issue too that we can talk about, because sunlight outside and through the windows is two different animals. But if you have that as a component, it's not as biologically dangerous, because I believe that compensates, especially with the higher frequencies in the sunlight. But it becomes really dangerous at night. So you've got to switch back to incandescents, and not just any incandescents. These are incandescents that are clear, transparent outer bulb, not the ones that are coated with the white to give a cool white light, because that's going to, you don't want that. You want the 2700 degree Kelvin incandescent thermal analog energy source of that light.
It is definitely a good idea to keep away the short wavelengths in the evening, so after sunset, as you said. And it's also a good idea not to intoxicate your environment with too much light. We know in the meantime that artificial light levels at night have reached insane intensities. So the intensity of a candle, for example, is absolutely sufficient for orientation. And if you have to read in the evening, or probably even at nighttime, my personal favorite light source for reading tasks is a low voltage incandescent halogen lamp, which is operated on a DC transformer. So direct current will eliminate all the dirty electricity, and it will eliminate all the flicker. And there are, for example, transformers available where you can adjust the output between 6 volts and 12 volts. And as long as it's direct current, there is no flicker, there is no dirty electricity, and you are able to dim the halogen lamp to a color temperature which is comparable to candlelight even. So this is the softest, the healthiest electric light you can get at the moment.
I'm sure this is going to help so many people, because again, age-related macular degeneration is a serious, serious issue. And I'm telling you, I just hope and pray to God that we can spread this message far and wide. Share this video with every one of your friends and family, because they need to know. Otherwise, we're going to have an epidemic of blindness. We already have an epidemic of obesity. We have an epidemic of heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, unless we can get ourselves away from these chronic, blue, unopposed, blue digital light sources, especially at night. So please share this message far and wide.